Burgess and Bolton's weekly wrap-up.
So, hello everybody, and welcome to this week's edition of Burgess and Bolton's weekly wrap-up, where we look at everything to do with the London market, technology, change, innovation. And this week we're going to look a little bit about tech, a little bit about AI and what that could mean for the industry and some of the issues. But of course, as always, we start with the news. So Ben, last week we had glasses news, as everybody knows.
Yeah,
Big news, glasses. I'm starting to get used to them. Just put everyone's mind at rest. Yeah, I'm not feeling quite as queasy when I put them on.
Yeah, it's all right. You're it's looking all right. I'm getting used to them, aren't you?
Me too. Anyway, so reinsurance, Ben. We talked a little bit about this before, but it's come out in the press again. I think costs are going to rise. Well, soar is the headline.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is this is going to be a big story. I think it's to do with it brings together everything really about the industry and probably the economic situation at the moment in the world, which is that we've shown this before. The rising cost of cats, insured cats over the years. We've had Hurricane Ian this year. We've still got a lot of COVID stuff hanging around within the numbers that have been somewhat kicked. The can has been kicked down the road on this, and now this is coming to a crunch point in which it is going to be hard for the market to get a lot of this stuff underwritten by reinsurers who are going to play hardball, and the negotiations are going to be extremely difficult at 1/1. So they're saying that here in this article, it's to do with a year of extreme weather. Yes, there is. I think they're saying 45 to 60 billion, I think, for Hurricane Ian, but that was already on top of a lot of other cats that we showed a few weeks ago. So it's a very, very expensive year, and this whole climate thing is getting more and more expensive. And the reinsurers are saying, well, we're not paying for this without our rates going up significantly. So it's interesting because the rates are going to go up a lot, like 30%, they say here. Peel Hunt is saying 30%. And Stephen Catlin is quoted, I think, in this article saying that, this is the crunch moment for the industry now. So it'd be very interesting to see how this all plays out, but it probably is going to be spilling over into 2023 because normally these things are done and dusted at the end of the year, largely. All the big programs set up and everything. So it is going to be very tough negotiations, and rates are definitely going to go up significantly. But the thing that I think is interesting is what's happening to the models behind all of this, because if you've suddenly got to hike your rates up by 30%, it does indicate that somehow these models are not really working to even give you a good guesstimate of where they are, because it's now like, God, we're in a terrible situation. We've got to push things through the roof. Now, I think that the economic situation is probably exacerbating it, and the war as well. So there's lots of things that I suppose we couldn't have known about, perfect storm and all that. But still, you think, well, a lot of this still is your traditional cat type, windstorm, fires, floods and things. Those are clearly getting worse. We've known that for some years, but it may also be, of course, they'll say there's a ramping up of these extreme weather things, so that there's more of them really, and our models didn't account for that. So in other words, the climate problem is running ahead of that, which is quite scary as well. Anyway, it's kind of where the industry, this central storm in the industry, it will affect rates right throughout. Arguably, positive news is that rates are up. It's a conversation or a negotiation that has to be done. The insurers are at the centre of all of this, and the value of these, these stocks, I guess, will go up. As it is a bit now for these value stocks. It's not the fluff and the fizz, the froth of the tech industry anymore. It's these boring old insurers that are at the heart of it. So quite a swing, I think, in the market generally.
So that I was going to ask a question, because that 30% number that you quoted there, but I mean that's massive, and as you were saying, that must have a knock-on effect into the insurance market and the prices customers pay in their premiums. Do you think that will mean that actually some customers will look at insurance and go, actually, there's better ways to transfer risk than this particular insurance product? Or do you think there'll be?
Well, so the problem with that, I think, it's a good question. I think the problem with that is several-fold. I think one of the issues, of course, is that we've got inflation, so costs are going up anyway, so premiums and rates have to take account of that. So asset values, if you like, are going up, or the cost of things is going up. So that's a real driver. And the other thing is the increasing shortage of capital. So the squeeze and the recession, or even depression that might come now in the market, is a squeeze on capital and money available. So that is outside. That is the market as a whole. It's not just the insurance market. It's just capital generally is contracting at a rapid rate in lots of, if not most, economies. So that is where the fear is in the market at the moment, is what happens what breaks, if you like, when that capital goes. But for insurance specifically, that means there is much less capital available. Therefore, rates will tend to go up anyway because of shortage of supply. But you add the increasing number of cats or climate-related cats to that and everything else, and you've got a situation where you get 30% rises. And the question is really, is that enough? Because what I think on Hurricane Ian, they said Florida now, is, I think we quoted it on here, it's something like 40% of those losses were uninsured losses. In other words, all those homeowners were that's gone. They can't get insurance. They're not paying for insurance. So the alternative for a lot of people and small businesses, I guess, is just to say, we're not paying for it. We'll take the risk ourselves. In other words, we just can't afford it. The trouble with that, of course, is that then knocks onto economies, and it's pretty disastrous, because you will have places like Florida now where there is, businesses won't go there. It'll be a no-go because the risks are too big and they can't get the ability to transfer risk.
Very interesting. And just the final point you made about insurer share prices going up, I think we were just talking off air that Beazley might be trying to get into the...
Yes, I think Beazley will sneak into, according to the Times, will sneak into the FTSE 100 this week. So that'll be of the quoted ones. I mean, it's not the biggest. It's a 4 billion, I think, company. It's definitely not the biggest insurer, but in the UK stock market, it's as the quoted ones out of the London, it's pretty big. So I guess it's symbolic. I guess it's also partly caused by techs falling.
It's interesting.
Yeah. So, but it does show you that the insurers are not, are kind of increasing in their standing in investment terms.
Very good. Thanks, Ben. Right, we're going to look a little bit around technology and AI, and you've picked up a couple of really interesting stories to kind of tee off our discussion. Let's start with this one about AI and ethics, because I'm quite interested in this. Give us a précis of the story, and we'll have a chat.
Okay. We've touched on this a few times, and I think when I did the first conference or whatever it was I did when we came out of lockdown prison. Was prison. Yeah, and I came out of prison. It felt like prison, a nice prison. But we did a tech conference, and it was touched on the subject of AI, and someone asked us in the audience, AI is fine, but does it cause as much problems for insurance in terms of its ethics and things? And I said, I think there is a big issue there. Anyway, it's not all about me, but it was just reminded me of that. And then we've touched again on various things around AI and the discussion on AI, which is it really interesting? I mean, it's much more interesting than things like blockchain and things like that. I think it does raise quite a lot of questions, and of course, AI is a very broad term. But this particular article, "A Machiavellian Machine Raises Ethical Questions About AI," I think is really interesting, because what this is it's a piece of AI. I think they call it like a Frankenstein piece of AI, because it's all sorts of different technologies bolted together, and it's an article really about the ability of AI to deceive human beings, and there's a piece in part of this article refers to the UK government, and I'm sure this is true of other governments, which has said that AI cannot be used. So it's illegal to use AI to deliberately deceive people. So that has already been built into law. But this is a particular story about a game called Diplomacy, I think, which I don't know, but it's kind of a board game like Risk, I guess, or something like that. And it's played online. And they put this piece of AI into it, acting as a human being. Now, first of all, nobody suspected that there was an AI bot in there playing the game. There were a couple of funny things that happened, but other than that, they didn't suspect. And the AI, by deliberately deceiving people and doing all sorts of quite underhand things in this game, came in the top 10% and did very, very well. And this has raised all sorts. This particular thing has raised all sorts of questions about what one of the professors calls quite a troubling future of AI, which is, in a sense, how easy it is to deceive people in these online situations. I guess if you're sitting in front of something like this, you might not be quite so easily deceivable. But online, I can see the point is that you don't really know what's going on, and it also makes the point that often human beings they're all different, of course, but often they have a sort of empathy, a level of empathy, which means they're not as ruthless or as brutal as you might always think, and they do. This goes back to all sorts of writing about why business works, which is that, relationships in business work between humans, because there's an innate sense of, if you're fair and you have integrity, you'll do better because it works both ways, if you see what I mean, even if it doesn't work on every transaction. Whereas AI isn't like that. AI will say, I'll just simply win this transaction because I don't have those feelings. I will win every transaction. So it becomes like, the most brutal sort of trader, if you like, of some kind. And I think it throws potentially business values off, that we're all used to as in dealing with people. We'll deal in all sorts of ways, and we think, well, maybe that wasn't a great deal for me now, but something will come back in the future. There's a balance there to be had, otherwise it doesn't work. So I think, anyway, for insurance, I think this has a lot of implications too, which is, how easy would it be to deceive people via AI? And when I talk about deception, I don't mean out and out fraud. It's just, what if you just set the AI to do something slightly different every time, that gave us a bit more profit on a deal, or a slightly higher rate, or it said you need to pay a fee for this, or something that was very tempting to do, and you decided. So it is really interesting, and I think it's quite worrying in some ways.
So I remember around about 5 years ago at TinTech, when kind of chatbots were first being used in kind of anger, and quite a lot of the discussion was, well, should the chatbot trying to be mimicking a human? So should you kind of, when you talk to that's on that chat, should your bit of AI or whatever the chatbot is, rather than putting the hand up and saying, you are now talking to a robot, there was quite a lot of discussion about saying, well, should you just pretend that they're talking to a human, and would you get a better interaction with that? And I think very quickly people realized that the technology wasn't up to speed. If you gave them an awkward question, they couldn't deal with it, and it was quite obvious that you were talking to a machine, not a human. So those discussions have kind of not already happened, but they're already in our consciousness. I think this kind of takes it to the next level as this technology advances, which it is doing at pace. maybe not in insurance, but certainly in other industries. To what are the implications, and who? There are a number of questions for me. Who's going to be the person who's responsible for monitoring the behavior, in inverted commas, of your AI? Now, you've got to do that on a regulatory front anyway. You've got to be able to show your workings if you want. Why did you make that decision, and route it all back? Well, that's fine. I think there's a cultural piece as well, and we know that, you know, little processes here and there suddenly get ingrained in the way that people work and the way businesses work, and sometimes those ways of working are not entirely right.
Yeah.
Okay, that's one thing. The other thing is we've got to remember that these are machines that are being programmed by somebody. So if you have a bunch of, let's say, male white people between 30 and 40, then you are going to have a series of unconscious or conscious bias in those algorithms.
Yeah.
And I think it's just really important to be aware that these aren't just, it's quite easy to just go, it's just a computer, and it isn't just a computer. There is human influence behind it.
I think so. So what I think we're talking about is exactly what it says in this article about ethical questions relating to decisions and judgments effectively made by frontline computing systems. Computer says no type thing. So one level, this is really, really important, because the future of the insurance industry is going to be heavily dependent, and we'll talk about this in a second, on technological change. It can't rely just on people anymore, and it needs to become more efficient, and it is doing that. So we are going to get more and more of this. So it will be entirely acceptable to push more and more computing at people, and numbers we're getting back now on brokers using systems in say the UK GI commercial market are big. They're 70% plus using all these systems, and all sorts of different systems and all sorts of things there. So the interface, or the volume of that interface, is getting to be pretty big, actually, without people really realizing, I think, how big that is. So the question is, if that's all just going on, the market's just getting on with it, no problem, as you say, then where are the AI ethics people or the computer ethics people in the businesses that we're looking at? Are there any? I don't know that there are any, because I think you're right. There are ethical questions about how do we present questions and ask questions to make sure we're not excluding people, minorities, and so on. We've got questions about is the way that we are setting up our e-trading systems or our claims systems or whatever, do they ask questions in the right way? Are they kind of set up so that you don't get some systemic negative impact from them? There's so many things, and that's, so the continuum is kind of inadvertent biases that you get with AI, through which you're describing, through to out and out fraud. And what this article is saying is, actually, certainly on this game, diplomacy, and I thought, well, actually, insurance isn't that complicated when it comes down to it. I could sort of see how AI could be applied to insurance with a few, we've already had things like price walking and things in the industry which have been slapped down by the regulator. So it's not as if we've had a history before this stuff of being whiter than white. So I think this is the concern. And I actually think that the industry should get on the front foot with some of this and say, actually, as an industry, we are going to be very ethical about this and do something. And I think things like saying, you are now speaking to an AI, please be aware of that. And if you have any problems, go to the AI ombudsman or whatever, which might be another bot, of course.
Just a bigger one.
Hello.
Hello. Yeah.
But I've noticed it, actually, just as an aside, I've noticed it on various YouTube videos now. Some of them, you get an actual bot talking over a video about something, like a camera or whatever it is I'm looking at, and it goes, hello, this camera is, and it's obviously, and people are saying, are you a chatbot talking about this camera? And so they're expressing a view about it that is which is a review, effectively, of this product. but it's an AI. Or, I don't know, it's someone who's just recorded it into a piece of AI and then it comes out the other end. Either way, I always switch those off because I think, well, I'm not listening to a bloody robot telling me a review.
Exactly. It's
yeah. But anyway, it's a huge new dimension, I think, and it's important. And then we're going to talk about then.
Yes.
Sompo,
so let's just kind of build on that a bit more, because this is a really interesting article about AI godlike powers. And yeah, this is something that at our conference and events is piquing so much interest, because all the insurers and brokers are sitting on so much data, and at the moment it's a mess, and they can't quite extract all the value from it. But this is really interesting, because this is a business leader in insurance suddenly going, oh my God, this stuff, it could be amazing.
So this stuff, I think, is really interesting. First of all, the context of this is AI is giving insurers godlike powers. That's a really worrying thing. That's like some kind of dystopian future, isn't it, really? Which is obviously what they're playing out in the article. But access to what this is about is access to large data means predictions are far more accurate in reducing risk. Well, maybe they are, maybe they're not, but there is definitely a massive move now. And this company that's mentioned in here, Palantir, is one of the big players in this, and there are others who are saying, we can now help you carriers to search out, find the data from all the little nooks and crannies in your business and place it onto the front line screens for all your people who do the frontline sales and business development and everything else. And that is releasing, it was saving cost at one level, it's releasing a huge amount of potential, as they say. And this is a one about a dementia product that Sompo is launching. So it's presented as it would be PR wise as a real positive thing. But again, linking back to the last story, this stuff is happening behind the scenes. Okay, it's not a lot of insurers will talk about this. They won't talk about Sompo coming out. Lots of them are doing it, but not a lot of them are saying it because they don't want to give away their competitive advantage. So there is immense competition around this data stuff, because if you think you can get ahead with your data, you've got the power to beat the competition, or just get ahead for a while and then the next thing and the next thing. So because this is now the competitive front line, I think it's going to raise, as any regulator would guess, the temptation to do bad things. And the more that people can understand and use the technology, from people like Palantir or whoever it is, providing this, making this machine work, the more they're going to have the facility to say, well, I'll just tweak the model. And I don't think insurance is as, people say it's as strongly regulated, but I don't think it's regulated in the same way that foreign exchange trading is, or equity trading or whatever it is. I think that we're behind on some of this stuff in the industry. So again, I come back to where's the controls, where are the things going in here that help, as well as the opportunity. And I don't deny there's not good opportunity, and we're very supportive of it. But yeah,
it is. It's really interesting. I like. Well, I don't know if I like, but only God knew about the threat. I think it was John Lennon that said the Beatles were bigger than Jesus, and he got in quite a bit of trouble for saying that back in the 60s.
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting that it's interesting how language starts to change, though. Once people would this Mikia Okamura from Sompo Holdings, using language like this, it's highly emotive, it's highly charged sort of language. He's clearly quite excited about this because he thinks he can make a lot of money out of it, obviously, or it's the things only God knew about. It's very extreme language, not the sort of stuff you'd normally hear about in insurance. And it would, if I was a regulator, I think I'd be saying, I might want to have a look at what you're actually doing with that stuff, please, before we go any further.
And I think that there's a couple of things I will say about data, and and this is on a kind of a practical front, just from talking to people and my very basic understanding of how this stuff works. But unless you have the data quality there, then it suddenly becomes not suddenly. It very soon becomes actually. So let's say you got 60% of the data, and then actually to get the other bits of the data in the right format, if it's not right, actually those bits of friction really do. So that really do make it all fall down. So I think there is a whole piece of work that needs to be done, and I'm not sure how you might tackle that. And it looks like just on the face of this article that they might have looked at one line of business and gone, let's just get all the data, at least straight, and then pull it together, perhaps using that piece of software, and then being able to very intelligently push it out at the right time to the right person.
Well, I mean, you make a good point, and I think one of the points about the whole shift, which was made, I think the World Economic Forum made this point about how the world of work will change in the future, and this was 7 or 8 years ago, and I think I've quoted it at some of the conferences, was that you'll get, but the key requirement, apart from business development and some innovation in that space around products and things, selling stuff, is also going to be around data science, as it was called. Now, data science, I think what they're really referring to is people who can interpret data and analyze it properly, and I think that's where we're short. We've probably got a lot of people who can run systems and computers and spreadsheets and things, but actually interpreting data, as you infer, is a really difficult job. And leaving it up to AI is one thing, but there are also judgments to be made at all different points of this. And we'll go back to it, there's a balance between the human input and the computer. And if you don't get that right, that's another problem you could have, either because the data all just falls apart and it doesn't work and your pricing goes wrong or whatever and you lose money. Well, but the other is that you actually start to exclude people, or you exclude certain types of insurance, you start closing operations, you start doing things that are simply led by the computer because you don't understand what's going on, because your data's flawed in some way, or there is a a kind of repeating issue or a repeating problem in the data, or a systemic problem with what you're analyzing. And that has happened in financial markets, of course. I mean, the issue of algorithmic trading in 2008 was that the computers jumped in, not people, computers jumped in and sold everything off in a few seconds, and they had to close the exchanges down to stop that happening. So as insurance gets into this world, it's got to be aware that there are huge things to consider, and I know they are. I'm not saying they're not, but I just think we're at a tipping point at the moment, and it's moving quite quickly.
Me too. That's very good. Thanks, Ben. Nice couple of articles there on AI, and I wanted to just talk a little bit, just building on that as well, about the launch of TinTech. So TinTech on the market, obviously looking at all the issues we've been talking about. Next year, 7th of Feb, got a nice kind of mix between Philip Hobbs coming, and there we go, Brit, Chief Data Officer, Kanika is coming as well to talk about that. So they're interesting talks, I'm sure. I just thought I'd highlight this one. So this is David McKenzie from CNA. He's going to give a case study around automating and extracting data. There's been a lot of talk in the market about the CDR and the way that that's going to work. This case study, I have heard it before. He gave it to a group of us, and has agreed to come along to the conference to share a bit more widely. It's really interesting, the process they went through in order to get to the point where they went, actually, that is the bit of the process that we need to automate. And then from that, they could then go, okay, where else can we apply that methodology throughout our organization in order to identify and fix other pinch points, bottlenecks, whatever it is, in our processes. So it's not it isn't about, as we always talk about, it's not taking a process and going, how do we automate the hell out of it so no one touches it? It's about saying, where are the pinch points where actually humans are just doing a manual process of maybe triage or whatever it is, where a computer could take over. So it'll be fascinating.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting, and that's the crux of it. Really, is what is the management of the move into a more technologized industry, and that's a thing that will never stop. It will go on forever, but it's because we are at a moment of probably quite a lot of change. Economic things driving that, pandemic, digital, etc., etc., etc. Because of all of that happening at once, you do feel that there's quite a lurch going to happen now again, and that if you simply put systems in without understanding what the relationship is between human beings and those systems, and it's interesting because I was talking to some technology people this week, and they are very language is interesting. They're very gung-ho quite often about saying, I think almost everything could be replaced by technology and done by the technology that's available, which is what you tend to hear from people sitting in the towers of these businesses. And I don't doubt it, but I have a counter view, which is that actually, which I've said before a lot, is that's only going to be true to a degree, because in the end, these are computers serve humans, not the other way around. Okay, and I think that will always be the case, thankfully. It's just that we'll have things that go wrong, and then people will realise that wasn't a great idea. So some things will work and some things won't. But in the end, it will be humans have got a great will to survive, and I think they won't get into a 2001 Space Odyssey situation with HAL saying it's all over. I'm taking over the ship. So that's my optimistic view. The question, though, is how far does technology take over the picture? What's its footprint, if you like, on the whole business? I think actually what that talk is about, or should be about, is what does it enable the people to do more of?
And that is actually very much kind of, I was just going to say, it isn't about the technology. It's about kind of the way that it is almost freeing up people to do their job better.
Yeah, the talent argument is basically saying people want to go to markets where they can express their talent and have a great time doing it and getting paid for it. The problem in insurance at the moment partly is that people don't think that'll happen because they think it's boring and dull, and you're going to be tied down by administration and bureaucracy and all those sorts of things, which people hate, right? Generally, they don't like that sort of thing. That's why they don't come. So there are other things that play into that, but that's one of the big things that turns people off about jobs. What am I going to be doing? Am I going to be doing something interesting? And I think the potential for people doing interesting things with ideas is massively greater than technology. I think technology typically takes the drudge away. It doesn't, and it does it magically in lots of areas. But once it does it, it's taken for granted, and it's dull and boring. And it's what the people do as a result of that. And actually, the whole push of technology has been that it's about the people and the things. I mean, largely, it's freed people up, and it's allowed people to set up businesses cheaply and express their ideas and whatever. So it's an immensely liberating thing when it works. And it reduces the cost and the barriers to entry for people wanting to better themselves and make money and grow the economy and have better lives. And I think that's why technology is so important. But I think we get a bit caught up with the technology itself still.
Yeah. Great. Good stuff, Ben. I'll obviously see you there in February, and we'll do a proper preview.
Am I invited? Am I? Okay.
Of course you are.
I don't know. I'm not assuming.
No,
I don't know.
You are. Very welcome.
Okay.
Yes, we'll do a proper preview of that in the new year. But let us. Let's just talk about our Christmas.
I wanted to ask you one thing. Just
Yeah.
occurred to me on that. That these tech conferences that you do, they're much broader now, aren't they, than they ever were in terms of the people going along. I mean, it's kind of serious point, not being facetious. They are much broader than these. They used to be quite techie type conferences, didn't they? And now there's much a broader group of people.
Yeah, I would. So, and that's reflected in the conversation we've just had, where they realise that actually to implement technology successfully, it's not just about the plugging in of the actual tech. It's about how you then manage that change on a cultural, people, an organizational level in order to get that buy-in. And the other thing I think is the realization that this, let's just say, digital transformation, it's not an end point. It's
No.
getting yourself into a place where you can continually take on new technology, because we don't know what the technology is going to be like in 5, 10, 15 years. So you need to now be in a place, rather than building, I think in the past you would get your servers, everything would be in a house, you'd have a huge, you'd probably have just an office full of your computing tech, and that was your kind of castle. And now that has changed with the onset of the cloud and being able to get rid of those huge servers, or at least outsource that, and that gives you more agility, because that then means that if you do have an idea and you say, oh, wouldn't it be great if we did this and this and this, and then the IT guys went, well, we can't do that because we've got a big castle full of servers and that means ripping them. You just go, actually, we could do that. So and we can try it really quickly, really cheaply, and we can have a go. So you're right. So in terms of the audience, then it broadens out, because that starts to pique the interest of the operations director and the underwriting director, because they're going, okay, well, we've done all this. Is there a better way that I could work? Could you give me data on this? Could you give it to me in a different format, or through a different medium, whatever? So I think you're right. I think it has, when was Tintech? 12 years ago, it was like 30 people in a room kind of just talking about, will technology ever impact insurance? And if you now look where we are, it's definitely about how do we get the best out of technology and make sure we're in the right place to take advantage of whatever future developments come along. That's a much more positive conversation and fruitful conversation for everyone in the business, really, who's trying to grapple with those strategic challenges of deploying resources in order to make your best competitive play. So it's really interesting.
It is, and I think there is technology that's actually in play now, because I think my sense has always been there's a lot of talk about the future, and it's always kind of elusive. It's just slightly beyond your grasp as to what that is and is it going to happen. Whereas now there's a lot more. I mean, we have a lot more data as well on people using these things. So they're products that's tangible now, that you can say, well, what's the experience of people using these? So you go then and what's the customer experience, and what are the benefits, and what happens? So I think as technology starts to get implemented, that happens. And then you do get, because you had Paul Brand last year, didn't you? And now you've got Phil Hobbs. So you've got two of the leading kind of chief execs. So I think I wouldn't call them technical in that sense. They are proper sort of leaders of the business. I know Phil's new in post, but I know him, and he's not. He's a human leader, as it were. He's a proper business leader, not I'm an ex-underwriter who happens to be running the business at the moment. So I think that's the interesting thing, is that those people want to come and talk about the integration into their strategy. And I think it is about strategy ultimately. What's the strategy for the industry and the market, and then for your own business? And technology is part of
Definitely. Excellent.
Good.
Right. So let's move things on. So let's just talk a little bit about our Christmas special. We kind of said that we're going to do something special in a couple of weeks' time, which we are going to do. We're going to get some insights from people around their highlights for the year and what they're looking forward to for 2023. We are going to do our People of the Year awards. We're just pulling together a short list, and we're going to just talk about what that means, What does it mean for those individuals? What's it mean for those companies? And what's it mean for the industry as well? So we can just reflect on that. And then we'll have a bit of a funny quiz, and I'm sure some mulled wine and mince pies as well. So normal stuff.
Yeah.
That should be
good. Looking forward.
Right. So let's wrap up, Ben. So we've talked for a couple of weeks about the World Cup. We've been enjoying it, but it's been a bit flat. But I think this week it really awoke, especially last night with Argentina managing to fill a stadium and then winning, which was brilliant to see. So I'm actually genuinely excited for the time.
Yes, I've had some very boring bits as well, but it's getting there. It's a slow burn.
Is, it's a slow burn.
But it is getting there. Yeah, it's interesting. I think one of the interesting things is talking about some of the sort of negatives that were said at the beginning. It's interesting how some of that has sort of dissipated a bit. I mean, some of it's still there, but actually it does seem to be going okay, largely. I always think with a lot of these things, like we say, at the beginning, before anything's actually happened, it's very easy to say it's going to be a disaster and terrible and awful. But running conferences, and I've done a few events and things like that, if you're doing it, you have to put all that out of your mind, don't you? And just go, look, we're just going to get on with this and do it and do our best. And usually it goes all right, doesn't it? Because people want to make it work. And I was just going to, one of the things I think is this whole thing about alcohol, which was almost this was about like, almost we've all got a right to be drunk if we're an England supporter. And, but a lot of people are saying, actually, it's created quite a good atmosphere there. And I think it's got to be a balance, but everything's got pros and cons to it. I think all the drinkers went to Tenerife.
Anyway.
And they had a brawl. My son was sent out there to do the story on it with the Telegraph. So,
Is he wearing a Welsh kit or an English kit?
He went out with a war photographer who's done 24 wars to film potential trouble and photograph it in Tenerife, but it didn't happen.
Oh dear. Here we are.
So there we are.
I actually heard Tony Blair on the newsagents last week, and he's still a very good politician. And they questioned him about the Qatari World Cup and the bid and whatever, and he was basically saying, okay, the bid was corrupt. we all
it was. Yeah, we know that. Allegedly.
No, it was. I'm quite happy to put my hand up and say it was.
It's fine. Have you checked our insurance recently? No, it's fine.
And so he was going, right, okay, but we are where we are, and if you look at the direction of travel for that country, then it's moving in the right way. I think they were saying that when Sadiq Khan took down any Qatari advertising from the underground, he was just going, it's just, what's the point of that? It's just.
But yes, I think it's virtue signaling, and I think it's not really going to affect things. I think you're right. I think you need a certain modicum of protest and challenge, which it has been, I think, but that's got to be done in the right way. Got to make them certainly feel that this is not sort of papering over things. It is about progress, and that's what you'd expect. So I mean, I wouldn't have chosen FIFA to push that thing, but
there we are.
Hey,
anyway, looking forward to a good weekend of games, and of course it's December now, Ben. So it's Christmas run up to Christmas now, and Christmas parties, all that kind of thing. Well. So quite excited, really.
I've been to one Christmas party.
Was it good?
Yeah. Too early. I don't think you can have them in November.
Me neither. Yeah, I've got first one. I've got some people coming around on Friday, so tonight. So that's good.
Nice.
Excellent. Right.
Good.
Thanks for tuning in, everybody. We will see you next week, and have a good weekend.
Burgess and Bolton's weekly wrap-up.